Imagine a day where children are guided and nurtured in a way that honors their unique humanness. A day where, instead of being expected to change in order to fit in, children can be met right where they're at. Welcome to Where They're Planted, a podcast for parents and care providers of unique children. Caring for a child with a developmental, emotional, or behavior challenge, a neurodiverse brain, or difficult early life experiences can be confusing and exhausting. On this podcast, we'll help your child flourish and strengthen their roots by helping you not only understand them, but also gain the skills to help them bloom where they're planted. We'll use brain science, nervous system tools, collaborative strategy sessions, and a deep understanding of the developmental process to create a fertile environment around your child in order to nurture their growth. I am your host, Jen Bluske, an occupational therapist with over 25 years of experience and a parent coach. My most closely held title, however, is that of a single mom of 2 thriving adopted kids, so I have walked this walk. I am truly excited to share, teach, and dive into these important topics on each episode. Welcome back to Where They're Planted. The school year is upon us as of this recording in just 2 weeks. The start of the school year is often exciting, but can also come with unknowns, changes in routine, and often a sense of anxiety for both parents and the child. There are so many logistics that happen with the start of school, routines to reestablish or maybe establish for the first time, and decisions to make related to activities, transportation, work schedules, and how to best meet your child where they are at during the school year. We know that our children look to us to help create a sense of safety within change, as well as a co-regulating force throughout the day. Today, we want to take some time to create intentionality around the school year for you and your child, provide some opportunities for reflection about what will work for your child and your family, and finally offer some strategies to ease the transition into the school year. I am here today with Sarah Dimick, parent coach at Children's Therapy Network and Thriving Parents Collective. Sarah is a school psychologist with 20 years of experience working in the schools, providing psychoeducation and mental health services for kids ranging from ages 3 to 13. Sarah is also a certified yoga teacher and is passionate about using movement for regulating mind and body. I am excited to talk to Sarah today as someone who not only has inside experience of what the beginning of the school year is like for children in the schools, but how this experience blends with how she supports parents in their role as parenting. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a good topic to start talking about this time of year, right?
Very timely.
So, to set the stage, when we know the school year is upon us, especially for our unique kids, there are just so many considerations and so many things to get ready for. Where do we start?
I think I would start with just reflecting on what school was like for you. So as a parent, what was school like for you? And then make sure that you are parenting the child you have in front of you and not the child that you thought you might have or the child who might have the same or different experience that you would have in school. I know for me, I liked school and school was pretty easy and I assumed it would be the same for my kiddos, and that is not the case. And so it's been a place to reflect and get really curious about what are our values for school? What seems important? What will it be like for my kiddo?
You know, I think that that's so powerful because, the podcast Where They're Planted, meeting our kids right where they're planted, is important because we are creating strategies, you're right, for our specific child. And some of our kids are going to be going into the school year with an IEP in place. So that's the individualized education plan. Some of our kids have no special supports in place, but maybe could use some, right? Or maybe struggling a little bit. And for some of our kids, they might, be excited and really love to learn and excited to see their friends and sort of ready to, bye mom, I'm leaving, and run into the school. And so that self-reflection is really powerful. What might parents think about in order to give them clues around parenting the kid they have within the school environment they're in?
Yeah, well, I would consider sort of my child's developmental level. So, what do I know about where they are in terms of cognitive development, motor development? I think taking into account your child's own sensory system and what they might need, taking into account some of the social skills that might be challenging or maybe that they need to work on. I think there's so much that goes into school that's not just the learning,
Mm-hmm.
but so many pieces to consider.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really think about trying to pull out of the cobwebs of your brain, if your child was in school last year, what that experience was like, and just helping remember kind of, we have some history, we have some known, right? And it doesn't mean it's going to repeat, but use the information you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for one of my kiddos, I learned that I just had to hang on for the first 6 weeks of school and then we would settle. But it would take a good 6 weeks for us to kind of figure out routine and feel comfortable and safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up routine. We know that there's such power in routine. There's such
Yeah.
power in having kids understand known. Let's talk about that power of routine in this process of getting ready to go back to school.
Yeah, I think routine for me is setting that base of security or safety, really just helping our kids feel safe. Like, here are the guardrails,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so kids feel comfortable. And when within that, I like the idea of connection and then choice, right? And so how can you create some connection points with your routines? And so asking your kid, do you want to wake up with a back rub or listening to music? So places where you can build connection into your routines. And I think choices are great too. It gives a child a sense of some control and some security, and limiting those choices. Sometimes too many is overwhelming. So this or this, and letting your child choose from there. You want to get dressed first or eat breakfast first? Do you want to get your shoes on first or put your backpack on first? I think there's lots of places we can give choice. Even just setting up the routine in general, like the night before, sort of plan. What is this going to look like in the morning? What are our steps? And having the child help you figure out.
If some of our kids aren't able to verbalize that, but even if they can't verbalize their preference, by really cueing in and attuning into our kids, we can often sort of figure out where their preferences are. We can kind of figure out what makes sense. I know for some of our kids that we work with, and maybe some of us, like, we got to eat first thing. Like, the preference is
Yes.
food, right?
Yep.
And like, the morning is going to go better if we've got food in our systems. For some of my parents, I even encourage them to wake their child up with a glass of, I don't care what, something that has some calories, right? To sort
Yeah.
of get them alerted and oriented before the less preferred brushing teeth and stuff like that kind of pops
Right.
into the routine, because it has to happen. How can we sort of really attune in and pay attention to our kids around those choices?
Well, all behavior is communication. So they're going to tell us one way or another, right? If this is working for them or not.
Absolutely. And then when I think about routine, as we're recording this, we're, in the middle of August, right? So like, families have had 2 months now of loosey-goosey, often summer, vacation, staying up late, lax meal routines, all of this sort of summer fun, right? And then in 2 short weeks, kids are going to be getting up. A lot of our schools, at least in the Madison area, are starting at like 7:30 in the morning.
Right.
Right. They're going to be getting up very early. Suddenly they're waiting until, 12 o'clock to eat lunch, and all of these things that come into the school routine. And what can we do right now without ruining the last 2 weeks of summer in order to, support our little nervous systems and our flow of the day, to not make it such a shock to the system?
Yeah. Yeah. So those small shifts, right? What's the small steps that I can take towards this bigger goal? I think often the recommendations are move your bedtime back, right? 5 minutes, so that you can start getting up a little bit earlier in the morning. I think eating is really important, right? Our kids need stamina to make it through a school day.
Yeah.
So thinking about what choices can you have in the morning that your kid will eat, and we'll get them some healthy calories, like you were saying. I think if we jump in and we sort of say school's starting and here's our new schedule and it doesn't feel fun, nobody's going to want to do it. So, right, where can you still build in those pieces of fun or joy or connection while you're making the small steps?
Yeah. Well, and even something as simple as, like, I don't know, for myself, I'm not a big mealtime person. I'm just no good at it. And so I remember thinking about, I didn't always even say it out loud to my kids, but I remember sort of starting to march a little more natural mealtime routine into our end of
Mm,
our summer times, right? We might, more
mm-hmm.
consistently eat between 11 and 12. And in the
Yeah,
doldrums of summer, like, we might have pushed lunch back until 2 because we didn't have any reason to not. And so just those little natural flows that as a parent, you can just sort of pay attention. Child doesn't even necessarily need to know it's happening, but their body does.
right,
Right.
right. They can feel it. They can
Right.
feel the new rhythm.
Yeah, they
Mm-hmm.
can start to feel. Or, for example, another one is in the summertime, a lot of kids kind of just stay in their jammies and run around and do whatever, right? And again, great. And, if transitioning into clothing, school clothing, maybe we think about just having a clothing transition to go out and grab gas or grab some groceries in the mornings, just again to help those little systems just sort of acclimate
Yep.
to some of that sensory based shift that happens
Yeah.
when we're in a routine of school.
Yeah. I mean, great way to practice. I think sometimes we assume, oh, kids will love new school clothes. Some
Mm.
kids don't, right? So
No.
let's figure that out before school starts. Give it a go. You don't like the way that one feels. Got it. Good to know.
Right, right. And so those sensory based routines, but to ask a child to suddenly be bathing every day or however often you do it in your household
Yep.
and, going to bed and doing it within a time frame, as parents, just that little bit of awareness. And it also saves you the stress of having to suddenly be like square peg round hole into a school routine, right?
Right.
You can have a little bit of fluidity as opposed to
Yeah.
really getting into it with your child. And again, a lot of times we talk about it with children, and sometimes we don't have to. Sometimes we just
Mm.
attune in and do with and for by really observing how they're
Mm-hmm.
doing. I want to
Yeah.
think about for a second, for some of our families, I know that we're doing sort of above and beyond support, or we're really needing to work directly with the school, or really have kids who are anxious and they really need a lot of routine. They really need to understand what's going to happen in the school day. What can we do in order to work directly with the school, or to, if we can't work directly with the school, to really support the child to have that comfort with school
Mm.
before
Mm-hmm.
that first day?
Probably depends on your unique kid and if they already have a plan in place. If they have a support plan through a 504 or an IEP, you
Mhm.
often have a case manager, and absolutely parents can reach out to those case
Mhm.
managers, email first couple weeks before school just to sort of say, hey, here's some updates, here's what I know what's working best for my kid right now, here's some worries that we're having, any ideas for us. And I think that communication can be really, really important.
Mhm.
You can also, even if your child doesn't have an IEP or 504, always reach out to the school psychologist or a school counselor or a school social worker. They may not be in the building full time, but they are there to
Mhm.
support kiddos. And I think they often appreciate getting to talk to families. So don't hesitate to reach out. And then usually you'll find out your teacher, hopefully a couple weeks before school starts, and they'll offer opportunities to come in. And if it's not great for your kid to come in when everybody else comes in, ask if you could set up a time to do it individually, right? Do you have 15 minutes where we could stop in and see the classroom?
I think all of those are so lovely. And, I feel like, again, the sense of known for our
Yeah,
kids, right? So if it's a new school, can we be playing on the playground,
yeah,
right? Of the new
absolutely.
school? Can
Yeah.
you go just like spend some time at the playground so the playground
Yeah.
is familiar? Is this the time that if there are any friends or are any kids that your child happens to be in communication with, can we set up a few play dates to start reminding our kids of their social connections at school? The use of visuals are just so important. In your experience, Sarah, in the schools, some of our kids having visuals of, you start the morning in Mrs. Smith's class, and then you go to gym, and then you have lunch, and then mommy picks you up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes just a picture of the face, right? Like here's a picture of the teacher that you'll start the day with, and here's a teacher you might see later. It can go a really long way in building security.
And just having those knowns, I feel like for our
Mm-hmm.
kids is just so important at the beginning of the
Mm-hmm.
school year. Because, I mean, I think everybody's a little anxious, teachers included, at the beginning of the school year. And so that kind of leads me to one of my other thoughts is this idea of managing our expectations. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
What managing our expectations for school might be.
Yeah. Well, and I think it comes back to sort of let's reflect on your own experience with school and your own values and beliefs about what school could be or should be. Starting there, I think there's a place for, again, just really knowing your child. Like, let's be curious, right, about what's working best for my kid right now. And like you were saying, observe, notice. Can we get a sense for what's working, what's not working?
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes parents work really hard to make sure their kid is ready for school and they're trying to prepare for any situation that could happen. And sometimes our kids just need to experience it, right?
Yeah.
And so
Mm-hmm.
hopefully you have some confidence in your child's teacher to handle those little things that are going to come up, because they will. And that's how our kids are going to learn. So sometimes the expectation isn't that it's going to be perfect and everything is going to go really well. Sometimes the expectation is my kid will learn when this challenging things happen.
Yes. And that maybe at the start of the school year, our children aren't able to do everything yet independently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe the expectation is we get into the school door and they get out at the end of the day, right? And maybe that's good enough at the beginning. For some of our kids who either really need to understand their routine first, or, there's some experience or some sensory differences that is really just intense and it's going to take a minute to create safety and figure it out. Or that, school is really all the energy that they have in their day.
Yeah.
I see that so many of our kids, like school takes up all of their energy. Can they get themselves dressed? Absolutely. Are they able to on school days? Absolutely not. It's too much. And so this is the idea of managing, okay, am I going to expect from my child today? Because they can do all of it individually, but they might not be able to do it all at once or all together.
Yeah. I talk about that with parents in the sense of our nervous system is like a bank account, and there's withdrawals and there's deposits. And even the fun things, even if your child enjoys school and likes the social aspect, it's still a withdrawal from our sensory system. And so they still might come home and just need that downtime and just need to release somehow. And so let's be aware, right? Like I might need to put some more deposits in at the end of the day because there's just been a lot of withdrawal.
Yeah. And, you bring up something so important is the end of the school day, right? That end of the school day, classically, so many kids have all the activities after school, or they're off to therapy, or they're off to, whatever. Sometimes, they're in after school programs because parents are working full days, which just is what it is. And really considering what the nervous system can manage at the end of the day. I know for me as an adult, like I have got some skills with my nervous system. I do this for a living. And at the end of the day, I need people to not talk to me and I need to sit on the couch for a minute. Right. And then I think about some of my kids that I work with, and they have 2 hours of activities every night after school. And they have neurodivergent brains, and they have sensory systems that are really overloaded a lot of the time. And I wonder if we think about expectations and think about sort of a less is more approach some of the time.
My kid was a good teacher for me this way. I would always want to know what the day was like because I knew he was having trouble regulating. So I would interrogate and what's going on and what happened and how did you handle this? And he finally was just like, it's too many questions. And we agreed that I got to ask 5 questions after school. And it made me stop and really be thoughtful about like what's important for me to know and what kind of questions do I want to ask. And it gave him some control and some space of like, too much, Mom, back up.
Yeah. And some of our kids aren't able to verbalize that as beautifully as your son did, right? Yeah. So they might just start throwing, their water bottle at your head in the car, or, they might start screaming or whatever it might be, or they might get locked into a screen because it's the only way they can kind of communicate to us. Like, I can't do one more thing right now.
Right. Too many questions.
Too much. And so sometimes pulling stimulation away after school, especially those first few weeks of school, can be really important. And checking in with your child, again, especially our kids with sensory processing concerns, trauma histories, neurodivergent brains, right? The school experience can already be sort of a lot for our kids.
Right.
I classically talk about our kindergartners, right? I don't know a kindergartner out there who didn't get home from kindergarten and fall asleep and then wake up and eat their lunch because they couldn't figure out how to eat their lunch during the school day, right?
Yes.
And so, I do a lot of cueing of parents of that age child of like, that's all they got. Like, we're not doing
Yep.
other things after, that 3:30 time, at least that first couple of months,
Yep.
until some of that newness wears off and routine sets in, in order to be able to really meet them where they're at.
Yeah. And be okay if your kid is whiny, or be okay if your kid snaps at you, or be okay if your kid communicates in some other way, right? Let's validate that that's real for them. This stress is real. And our job is not to add to the stress by adding another expectation, but to just meet them where they are.
Which is a beautiful opportunity, if you've listened to some of our other episodes to co-regulate. It's a beautiful opportunity to honor emotion and set boundaries around emotion, right? Those are the things that we've talked about sort of on this podcast is, what do we do with an overwhelmed nervous system in our children, or, some emotionality that's popping up for our kids is to honor it a little bit, and then just set some parameters and some boundaries to create safety and to create some known around some of these big emotions, so that we can have kids who can say to us, Mom, I can't do all the questions after school. It's too much, right? That's what we want. Or, Mom, I just need 30 minutes of a break. I can't sit down to do my homework because my head's going to explode. Or, whatever it is like, I'm so tired, or I have so much pent up energy. I just need to go and run outside before I go to the next thing I'm supposed to be going to. Which then creates some really grounded and regulated kids who then likely will have more success in school.
Right. We're going to build that resilience and that stamina, but we can only do that when we start where they are.
Right. And who are able to, say during the school day what they need, or to be able to get like, oh, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, but I think I can make it through the math test, or whatever it is that they might be doing. The last thing is just really thinking about, and it's something for parents to consider, but what that overall family schedule is looking like during the school year, and just being somewhat intentional about that for our kids so we can set them up for success. What are your thoughts on that, or what would be your recommendations as parents consider the overall family schedule?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of pressure out there to get your kids signed up for the right thing, or to do all the sports, or make sure you're in the right club, and create structure and routine all day, every day. And that might work for some kids, and it does not work for other kids. No. And so really tuning into, what am I seeing? If we have 2 activities after school, what do I notice bedtime is like? Oh, it's not going well. Okay, well, then it's on the parent to make a shift, right? Like, okay, what can we take out of our schedule so this feels more peaceful for everybody? Or, dinner time is a train wreck, right? People aren't eating or able to sit. And okay, what shift can I make as a parent so that this can go better? Mealtime is important to me. I want this to happen as a family. We might need to give something else up. So I think it comes back to that, taking the step back, observing, being curious, and not sort of imposing our own desires or wants on our kid, but really responding to what they need.
And taking a lead in setting up the family structure, especially during the school year, again, goes back to where your beliefs are as a family. Like, what do you want for your family? Do you want times of connection, right? Yeah. Does your child need a lot of movement? Do we need a lot of free open space and time? Is there a certain activity that is just very important for your family and your values that, you need to kind of work around to make sure that your child can do that one activity? There are many options in many ways, but I know that the intentionality is what's the most powerful thing within, what you're able to do. I mean, a lot of families are working until 6 o'clock, or, there are pieces and the parts that you might not have a lot of control over in your life. So find the places you do have the control. And
absolutely,
in these, in these school, especially these early school days, in order to create a family system that has a flow and is within the realm of what we can handle in a day. Yeah. So I wanted to just give some key takeaways. We gave, again, a lot of information just about things to consider with the beginning of the school year. If families are to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to make sure I focus on a couple of things. Like it's August, we've got 2 weeks until school starts. What would those top take homes be?
I start with the idea of we need to create some safety.
Okay.
And so what does that look like for your child in terms of obviously the physical safety, but the emotional safety and just the sensory security of being in a good place foundationally. So takeaways would be taking a look at the schedule. It would be looking at the sensory needs. What can I put in? What do I need to take out?
Routine, right? Thinking about what you want your routine to be and start slowly implementing it.
Yeah. Yes.
And then managing your expectations. Where are you willing to give, right? Where's that edge of like, I'm just going to help. I'm just going to help so that we can get out the door. Or like, no, this is really important that I pick this battle and they do it themselves. Being really clear for yourself as a parent, where those lines are, right? I know, I'll give an example. For my son, he would not get on the school bus for 2 years. It was just too much. I chose not to pick that battle. I had the ability to do that. Because I chose to like let the rest of the school day be okay. So that was a choice I made. I chose not to pick the battle. Could I have? Absolutely. Right? So where are those edges? Which battles are you going to pick and which things are you going to be like, you know what, kiddo, I'm just going to help you and support you here.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that through.
I like that idea of like, let's support the relationship. Like I'm here to manage the relationship and not the behavior. Like absolutely. You will learn to get on the bus at some point. Like,
and he did when his sister went to school. Then he got on the bus.
Absolutely. They will figure it out. But in the moment, what's most important? That he felt supported and secure.
That he made it into school and was able to learn and function. So those are our takeaways as we think about getting back to school. And I think I'm going to leave it there for today. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
If you like what you heard today, check out our Empowered Parent Coaching course offered through Thriving Parents Collective. In this course, you will get videos and course content to help you learn and develop the strategies you seek to meet your child right where they're at. Go to the show notes for the link. Where They're Planted is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Jen Bluske. Music is by Gaston Reen and Pod 5. Thank you for loving your child right where they're planted.